The first light of dawn stretches slowly across the savanna, but it is not a gentle awakening. The sun rises like an unrelenting eye, pulling shadows long and thin across the ground, exposing every hollow, every wrinkle in the dry earth. The land is brittle. Grass stalks, once green and lush, now bow like fragile needles of straw. A faint wind carries dust, not moisture. There is no sweetness of bloom, no freshness of dew. It is a silence shaped not by peace, but by absence, an emptiness that weighs on everything it touches. Somewhere within this expanse, a family stirs. They are not modern people, not yet shaped by centuries of cities, tools, and writing. They are early humans, closer to the wild world that bore them, closer to the sharp edge of survival. Their fire is little more than embers now, a dim glow beneath blackened wood. Around it, bodies move sluggishly, as though time itself has grown heavy. A mother cradles her youngest child, brushing grit from its face with fingers that tremble from weariness. An elder coughs softly, trying not to disturb the stillness, though the sound cuts through the morning like a stone in water. Hunger has been with them for days. Not the brief hunger of a missed meal, not the dull ache of a skipped supper. This is hunger that presses into bone, hunger that rearranges thought. Their bellies ache, but it is their minds that suffer most. Every glance turns toward the horizon, searching for the flicker of movement, a bird lifting from the grass, the shadow of an antelope, anything that might break the monotony of emptiness. Yet the horizon gives them nothing. The silence is deceptive. Insects hum faintly, hidden in the grasses, and distant vultures circle where something has already died. But for the family, the world feels hollow, stripped of its offerings. No sound of hooves in the distance. No trickling water from a stream. Only the weight of still air, broken by the occasional murmur of children whose voices have lost their brightness. They are too young to understand the full reach of danger, but even they sense something is wrong. Their play has quieted. Their laughter has been swallowed by need. Hunger does more than weaken the body, it sharpens the edges of fear. The father, broad-shouldered but gaunt from days of walking and searching, scans the landscape with eyes that shift too quickly, too desperately. Every shadow could hold promise, or threat. He grips a wooden spear, though the point is blunted, worn by use and time. It is less a weapon than a reminder of what they must rely on: courage, togetherness, the faint hope that luck might break in their favor. For a moment, the silence seems to stretch endlessly, pressing down like a physical weight. Yet beneath it, there is motion. Far off, the grass shifts, and the faintest echo of a roar rolls across the land. The sound is distant, muted, but unmistakable. Lions. The family stiffens, their bodies tightening with ancient instinct. Predator. Danger. But also, possibility. Where lions roam, there is prey. Where there is prey, there is food. And where there is food, there is life. But the thought is as terrifying as it is tempting. To follow the lions is to step closer to death. Yet hunger does not allow hesitation for long. It gnaws and whispers, making the impossible seem worth the risk. It tells the family that silence is not safety, it is starvation. And starvation is slower, crueler, more certain than teeth or claw. The silence of the savanna becomes a canvas upon which the family's choices are painted. Each breath feels louder than it should. Each step crunches against dry earth with accusing sharpness. They move with hesitation, glances exchanged, silent questions in their eyes. Should we go? Dare we follow? The air itself feels like it waits for their answer. There is a moment when the mother lowers her head to her child's hair, breathing in the faint scent of smoke and dust. She knows that hesitation has its price. Her eyes meet the father's across the fire pit, and nothing needs to be said. Hunger has spoken more clearly than words. Their faces, carved by sun and struggle, show the same resolve. The silence before hunger breaks is not unlike the stillness before a storm. It is not calm, but tension coiled tight. The savanna is alive with waiting, predators resting after the night's hunt, scavengers circling in the sky, and this fragile family, daring to step into the same story of survival. The morning sun rises higher, indifferent, casting its harsh light across the land. Soon, the family will move. Soon, they will follow the scent of danger. But in this moment, everything is suspended, the hush of the world before the gamble begins, the ache of empty bellies that will not let them remain still. This silence, heavy and profound, is not peace. It is the breath before hunger pushes them into the lion's den. The sun has climbed higher now, spreading its weight across the plains, but the memory of the night still lingers in the air. The embers of the family's fire are not yet cold, faint red threads winding through the ash. Around that fragile circle of warmth, the family gathers, not because the flames give much heat anymore, but because the fire is more than fire. It is safety. It is memory. It is the fragile heartbeat of their small world. Each face carries its own story. The father sits closest to the spear, his eyes never still. They dart from horizon to fire, from fire to horizon, as though torn between the fragile safety here and the danger lurking beyond. His jaw is set, the muscles taut, but there is no food in his hands, no prey to show his worth. He is protector, hunter, but hunger erodes certainty. Every failed attempt to find game weighs on him like invisible stone. The mother crouches beside him, her arms wrapped tightly around the youngest child. The child stirs faintly, whimpering in its sleep, the sound thin and dry, like the cry of a bird caught in thorns. She rocks gently, her face half lit by the orange glow of the coals. Her eyes are hollow with exhaustion, but there is a strength in her stillness. She does not look away from the child. In her gaze is the knowledge that the little one has only her warmth to survive another night. Two older children sit side by side, their bones pressing through thin skin. They do not laugh, do not argue, do not play. Instead, their eyes follow their father's movements with a mixture of trust and unease. They are old enough to understand what hunger means. Old enough to notice the lines deepening on the adults' faces, the silences that grow longer each day. One picks absently at the dirt, tracing circles in the ash, as if hoping the ground might give something back. The other clutches a stick, turning it again and again in his fingers, imitating the way his father holds his spear. Even in hunger, imitation is practice for survival. The elder of the group, gray-haired and thin as the brittle grasses outside, sits slightly apart. His back is bent, his breathing uneven. He does not eat much, even when food is found, giving his portion to the children first. His hands tremble as they reach toward the fire, fingers stretching toward the last warmth. His eyes are not fixed on the horizon anymore. They drift instead toward memory, toward days when food was more plentiful, when strength surged through his limbs. He knows he will not walk as far as the others when they set out again. But he will walk as far as he can. The fire flickers faintly, casting light that exaggerates every shadow. Their faces dance in the shifting glow, expressions bending between determination, fear, and quiet despair. The flames whisper as if they too are hungry, devouring the last scraps of wood. In that circle of light, the family becomes something more than individuals. They are a unit bound by invisible threads of need and care. Each one exists for the others. The father cannot hunt without the knowledge that his children wait. The mother cannot protect her child without the presence of the fire her mate guards. The elder continues on, even weakened, because his memory is a guide that keeps the family tethered to past and future. This fire is not merely protection from predators, it is the point around which they define themselves. Without it, the night is chaos, hyenas cackling in the dark, lions roaring on the move, leopards waiting in silence. But with it, the family feels for a brief moment like they belong to something greater than fear. They belong to the lineage of all humans who ever sat by flames, whispering into the night. Yet hunger presses even here. The smell of ash does not fill their bellies. The sparks that rise into the air are beautiful, but they do not feed. As the children stare into the embers, their eyes blur with fatigue, and their stomachs rumble like distant thunder. The father notices and feels the weight of failure heavier than before. He looks down at the spear across his knees and wonders whether it will be enough. The silence between them is not empty. It is full of thoughts none dare speak. What if they do not find food soon? What if the children weaken further? What if the lions, whose roar carried faintly across the morning air, come closer tonight? The family knows these dangers, but they carry them like stones in the heart, too heavy for words. Words, even in their early form, are reserved for the urgent, the necessary. Much remains unspoken, yet deeply felt. In the shifting firelight, their faces reveal what words do not. The father's determination. The mother's worry. The elder's resignation. The children's waiting hope. Together they are a reflection of humanity itself, fragile, fearful, yet unwilling to surrender. Beyond the fire, darkness waits to return with the setting sun. The savannah is a vast and merciless stage, and the family is only one small band upon it. But in their fire-lit circle, there is something eternal. The hunger is unbearable, the risk immense, but the bond between them burns brighter than the flames. This bond will drive them forward, even into the jaws of danger. The fire crackles softly, then fades, leaving behind a single ember glowing red in the ash. The family's eyes linger on it, knowing they will carry that ember with them, nestled in bark or bone, to ignite flames again when night returns. Fire must survive. Family must survive. And so, though hunger has stripped them to silence, their faces in the firelight reveal the unspoken truth: they will risk everything to see another dawn. The savannah stretches endlessly, a vast ocean of grass that seems to ripple under the weight of the wind. But this is no season of abundance. The grass is brittle, yellowed by the sun, broken by patches of dry earth cracked like old skin. The sky is wide and pitiless, an empty dome of blue that offers no promise of rain. The land breathes with stillness, as though holding back some ancient secret, yet the silence tells its own truth: there is nothing here. Nothing to eat, nothing to gather, nothing to chase. The family moves slowly across this emptiness, their steps dragging, their eyes scanning with desperate hope. Each direction looks the same. Each horizon promises only distance. They are caught in a landscape that should be alive with thundering herds, with antelope leaping in great arcs, with zebras tossing their manes, with elephants treading paths toward hidden water. But the herds have gone. They have moved on with the seasons, chasing greener places, leaving behind a desert of noise and absence. It is not the first time this family has known such hunger. The land has always been fickle, generous one season, cruel the next. But hunger is different when it stretches for days, when the firelight brings no feast, when each breath feels heavier than the last. The father's eyes sweep the horizon for signs: the shimmer of dust kicked up by moving hooves, the sudden flash of wings as birds rise startled into the air. But the signs are absent. The savannah has folded in on itself, leaving behind a silence so deep it feels alive. Even the predators seem hidden. The lions, whose roar carried faintly at dawn, remain unseen. The hyenas, usually so bold, do not cackle in the distance. It is as though the world has held its breath, every creature vanishing into the folds of dry grass. Only the vultures betray the truth. High above, they circle in lazy arcs, drifting with the air currents, their eyes always searching for what the land denies the living: the remains of the dead. The children stumble often, their legs too thin, their bodies weakened by the emptiness. The mother steadies them, her hand moving quickly to catch an arm, to push a shoulder upward, to whisper in low tones that they must keep walking. Her own feet drag, but she will not show it. To falter is to give in to despair, and despair is heavier than hunger. She presses forward, her eyes lowered, watching each step as though the ground itself might reveal something, an edible root, a crawling insect, some small mercy. The elder lags behind, his breathing shallow, his body bent against the heat. He knows he cannot keep pace for long, but he forces his legs to move, step after painful step. The children glance back at him often, worry etched into their faces. They know the truth, even if no one speaks it, the land takes first the weak, then the strong. He does not complain. He has walked this emptiness before, and he knows that survival is not guaranteed. Yet there is pride in his silence, in his refusal to burden the others with fear. The savanna itself feels hostile now. Each gust of wind raises dust that stings the eyes and coats the tongue. The air tastes of dryness, of something missing. No river runs here, no lake waits behind the next rise. Where water once trickled, only mud cracks in the sun. The family pauses often, looking out over the land as though each pause might reveal a hidden blessing. But always the same, silence, emptiness, the absence of life. Yet in this emptiness lies a truth deeper than despair. Hunger has always shaped the rhythm of human life. It has forced families to move, to search, to risk. It has driven them to the edges of survival, to the brink of choices they would never make in times of plenty. Hunger is both curse and teacher, demanding resilience, sharpening instincts, binding families together against the cruelty of the world. The father grips his spear more tightly now, though there is nothing yet to strike. It is both weapon and symbol, a reminder that they are hunters even when the land mocks them with its emptiness. He looks at his children, their lips cracked, their steps faltering, and feels the weight of responsibility like a stone on his chest. He cannot allow the emptiness to win. The savanna may withhold its gifts, but he must find a way to claim them back. Every step forward becomes a battle. The heat beats down from above, the ground offers no comfort below. Even the insects seem scarce, their faint buzzing a hollow mockery of abundance. But then, a sound. The faint rustle of grass. The family freezes, eyes wide, bodies stiff with anticipation. For a moment, hope flares. But it is only the wind, moving the brittle stalks in whispers. The father exhales, shoulders slumping, the brief spark of hope extinguished as quickly as it came. Still, the family keeps moving. They have no choice. The savanna is endless, but so is their need. And within this emptiness, a scent lingers faintly on the air, faint, distant, but unmistakable. The scent of carrion. It drifts toward them on the wind, sharp, metallic, heavy with death. The father lifts his head, nostrils flaring. The mother notices, and her eyes widen. Even the elder straightens slightly, his breath catching. The children wrinkle their noses, half in disgust, half in curiosity. Where there is carrion, there is food. Not much, perhaps. Not fresh, not safe. But food. And where there is carrion, there are lions. The silence of the savanna is not emptiness after all. It is tension. It is waiting. Somewhere beyond the horizon, life and death are locked in their eternal struggle. Somewhere, the lions have claimed what the humans cannot. And yet, hunger whispers that the kill might be shared. The family pauses on the ridge, staring out across the endless grass. The emptiness has revealed its secret. It is not barren after all, it is dangerous. The family does not yet step forward, but the decision has already begun to form in their hearts. Hunger leaves little room for hesitation. In the emptiness of the savanna lies both threat and salvation. To survive, they may have to walk directly into the heart of danger, into the place no human dares to go, the lion's den. Long before this family set foot upon the dry earth of the savanna, others had walked the same path. Their bones lie hidden beneath layers of soil, their tools scattered in forgotten caves, their fire pits reduced to circles of ash turned to stone. They, too, knew hunger. They, too, lifted their faces to the sky and wondered if tomorrow would bring enough to keep their children alive. The story of hunger is not unique to this single family, it is the oldest inheritance of humanity. Every step the Father takes is an echo of steps made by men who came before him, men whose names were never spoken and never will be. Their footprints, pressed into ancient mud, hardened into stone long before his birth. Their struggles are etched into the land itself, cut marks on animal bones, stone flakes buried beside carcasses, traces of campfires that once flickered in the night. These are the quiet monuments of ancestors whose only prayer was survival. The family does not know this history in words. They do not recite it in stories carved into walls or written on scrolls. But it lives in their blood, in the instincts that tell them to huddle close at night, to sharpen stones against other stones, to fear the roar of lions but also to follow it when hunger demands. Evolution has preserved the wisdom of the dead, not in memory but in bone, in nerve, in reflex. Their bodies remember what their minds cannot. The elder, though weak, carries more than the weight of his own years. His gaze sometimes drifts into the distance, as though searching for figures just beyond the horizon. Perhaps he recalls the hunts of his youth, the faces of companions long gone. Or perhaps it is something deeper, a sense that he, too, is part of a chain that stretches back farther than imagination can reach. The children watch him, unaware of the memories that move behind his eyes. Yet even in their innocence, they know he represents more than himself. He is the living thread between what was and what is. The mother feels this connection most sharply as she clutches her child. In the child's frail body, she sees both fragility and continuity. This child is not just one life, it is a vessel for all that came before and all that will follow. Her arms hold not only her baby but also the future of their kind. Every ancestor who ever fought against starvation fought for this moment, for the chance that new life would be carried forward. The firelight from the night before was not just protection from predators, it was a signal passed down from countless generations, a reminder that survival depends on togetherness, that no family lives for itself alone. The Father knows it too, though he cannot name it. The weight he carries on his shoulders is heavier than his spear. When he scans the horizon for signs of prey, he is not just searching for today's meal. He is fighting against extinction. Deep inside, though he cannot give it words, he knows the truth: if his family does not endure, then everything before them, their struggles, their hunger, their victories, ends with them. The chain is broken. And so, even in silence, he feels the voices of ancestors urging him forward. Hunger, then, is not just a curse. It is the voice of the ancestors themselves, whispering that survival is the only prayer worth speaking. It was hunger that drove the first humans to shape stone into blades. Hunger that pushed them to risk crossing rivers, climbing cliffs, venturing into unknown lands. Hunger that dared them to stand against beasts far stronger than themselves. Without hunger, there would be no courage. Without hunger, there would be no need to invent, no reason to bind together. The savannah, empty though it seems, is filled with these echoes. Every hill, every dry riverbed, every scattering of bones tells of lives once lived, choices once made. The vultures that circle above are the same as those that circled 1,000,000 years ago. The lions that stalk the tall grass are descendants of lions that once leapt into camps, scattering fire and flesh alike. Time folds in upon itself here. The family walking now is simply the latest verse in a song that has been sung since the dawn of man. And perhaps, in some unspoken way, they feel it. The children, though too young to grasp the weight of history, cling to their parents with trust born not only of the present but of something deeper, an ancient instinct that says family is survival. The elder, weary but proud, knows his role is more than keeping pace, he is the living memory of how to endure. The mother, steady and fierce, carries the future in her arms. The father, eyes sharp with desperation, shoulders the burden of risk. Each role has been played 1,000 times before, by 1,000 families long gone, but each time the stakes were the same: life or death, continuity, or silence. The land listens. It has seen generations rise and fall. It has swallowed the bones of the weak and carried forward the footsteps of the strong. It holds no judgment, no mercy. It is not cruel, not kind. It is only vast, eternal, indifferent. Yet within its silence, the echoes of ancestors linger like ghosts, reminding those who walk it now that they are not alone. The family pauses on a ridge, the horizon stretching wide before them. Hunger gnaws at their bellies, sharp and insistent. Yet for a brief moment, as the wind stirs the grass and the vultures drift above, it feels as though unseen companions walk beside them. Ancestors whose names were never known, whose stories were never told, whose struggles made this moment possible. Their whispers cannot be heard, but they press against the silence all the same. Do not stop. Do not surrender. Carry us forward. And so, even in the face of hunger, the family steps onward. Each footfall is more than movement, it is an answer to the ancestors, a promise that their struggle was not in vain. They are hungry, they are desperate, but they are not broken. The echoes of the past walk with them, and in that invisible company lies the strength to risk what must be risked, to dare what must be dared, to survive against the silence. Hunger is cruel, but hunger is also a teacher. It carves lessons not into words or scrolls but into bone, into muscle, into instinct. It shapes the rhythm of each day, forcing choices that would otherwise never need to be made. For the family on the savannah, hunger is not a temporary discomfort to be ignored, it is the architect of their lives, the silent instructor that dictates when they move, how they move, and whether they will live to see another sunrise. The children feel it first as a gnawing emptiness, a weakness that makes them stumble as they try to keep pace. Their small hands clutch at their mother's skin, their cries breaking the silence of the grasslands. To them, hunger is pain without explanation. They do not yet know its meaning, only that it hurts and that it will not go away. But already, their bodies are learning. Every pang is a lesson in endurance, every moment of weakness a quiet instruction that life is not easily given, it must be fought for, tooth by tooth, day by day. The mother, though weary, knows the lesson in another form. Hunger teaches her to measure every step, to weigh the strength of her arms against the weight of the child she carries. She cannot waste energy. She cannot afford the luxury of panic. Her mind has been sharpened by hunger into a blade of calculation. How far can they walk before night falls? How long can her child survive without food? Which plants can be trusted, which must be avoided? Hunger has made her both protector and strategist, forcing her to transform fear into resolve. The father bears hunger most visibly. It drives him forward with a desperate clarity, narrowing his world to a single need, to find food. Hunger whispers in his ear like a relentless command, hunt, search, do not stop. It does not allow him to rest, does not allow him to forget that failure is death. It forces him to risk, to stalk prey larger and stronger than himself, to venture into dangerous terrain where predators wait. Hunger has taught him that hesitation is as deadly as weakness. And though his body aches and his stomach twists, hunger sharpens his senses, tuning him like a bowstring drawn taut. Even the elder, frail and faltering, has his lessons. He has lived long enough to know that hunger never leaves completely. It is part of the earth itself, a shadow that follows every living creature. His body may be weak, but hunger has taught him endurance of another kind, the patience of survival, the wisdom to know that suffering is not the end but the beginning of strength. His eyes hold memories of other famines, other desperate journeys. He has seen families scatter, seen the weak fall away, seen the strong endure. Hunger has taught him that life is never guaranteed, and that to walk forward despite the emptiness is itself a kind of victory. But hunger is not only a private lesson. It binds the family together, forcing them to share in one another's suffering. When the child cries, the mother feels the pain as if it were her own. When the father pushes forward, the others follow because they know his risk is for all of them. Hunger teaches them interdependence, the truth that survival is never an individual achievement but a collective one. Alone, each would fall. Together, they have a chance. And beyond the family, hunger teaches humanity itself. It has been the great instructor since the beginning of time. Without hunger, there would have been no fire, no tools, no courage to face beasts far stronger. Without hunger, men and women would have remained in small corners of the earth, never daring to cross rivers, climb mountains, or venture into the unknown. Hunger has always whispered, move. Risk. Create. Every innovation, every discovery, every step toward the future has been, in some way, an answer to hunger. The savanna itself reveals this lesson. Every creature that walks its grasses is shaped by hunger. The lions hunt not out of cruelty but because hunger demands it. The vultures circle overhead because hunger promises them a meal. Even the ants scurrying in the dust are driven by hunger, carrying fragments of leaf and grain to feed their colony. The family walking now is no different from them, part of the same law that governs all life. Hunger teaches equality before nature. It shows that no creature, no matter how strong or clever, escapes the same command, eat or die. Yet hunger teaches more than survival, it teaches imagination. As the father sharpens his stone tool, as the mother considers which plants might soothe the child's pain, as the elder recalls the memory of fire, each act is not merely repetition but invention. Hunger forces them to imagine what does not yet exist, a trap for prey, a safer shelter, a way to endure. Hunger creates not only suffering but also possibility. It asks, what else can be done? How else can life be preserved? And in answering that question, humanity learns to shape the world around it. There is cruelty in this lesson. Many will not survive it. Hunger has no mercy, no care for fairness. It does not distinguish between the strong and the kind, the brave and the cautious. It simply takes. Families vanish, bloodlines end, voices fall silent. But even in loss, hunger teaches. The survivors carry the knowledge of what failed, and with it, a new determination not to fail again. Every generation carries scars written by hunger, and those scars become guides for the future. As the sun sinks lower, the family presses on, their shadows stretching long across the dry earth. Each step is heavy, but each step is also instruction. Hunger teaches them that stopping is not an option. The air is thick with silence, broken only by the sound of breath and the rustle of grass, yet within that silence lies the oldest lesson of all, that to live is to endure, and to endure is to fight against the emptiness that never fully disappears. The child, restless in the mother's arms, finally quiets, exhausted by the effort of crying. His eyes, half closed, catch the last glow of the fading sun. He does not know it, but his life is a classroom shaped by suffering. Each pang of hunger is etching strength into him, strength that will carry forward long after his parents are gone. He will grow, he will remember, and he will teach the same lessons again to those who come after him. Hunger's education never ends. And so, hunger walks with them, not as an enemy, not as a companion, but as a relentless teacher. It strips away all illusions, all comforts, all pretenses. It reduces life to its rawest truth: survival must be earned. And though the lesson is hard, though it carves itself into flesh and bone with merciless precision, it is also the reason humanity endures. For hunger does not only take, it also gives. It gives strength, invention, courage. It gives meaning to the firelight, to the shared meal, to the bond between parent and child. Without hunger, there would be no understanding of what it means to be alive. As night begins to rise, the family finds themselves once more gathered close, the memory of hunger still sharp, the promise of tomorrow uncertain. But within their suffering lies the lesson that has carried humanity across endless ages: hunger is not merely pain. Hunger is knowledge. Hunger is survival. Fire was not always theirs. It was a gift stolen from the chaos of the world, a fragile miracle snatched from lightning-struck trees, from smoldering branches after storms, from the rare moments when nature itself cracked open and revealed its burning heart. For the family on the savannah, fire was more than warmth or light, it was survival, a shield, a promise. And on this night, as hunger gnawed at their insides and darkness closed in around them, fire was the thin line between life and death. The father knelt, coaxing the embers he had carried within a bundle of dried grass. His hands were steady though his body shook with weakness. He breathed carefully, feeding the faint glow, whispering to it as if to a living thing. The mother and children watched in silence, their eyes wide, their bodies drawn close. In the elder's gaze was something more than hope, it was reverence, memory, the awareness that this ritual was not simply practical but sacred. The birth of flame was the rebirth of their courage. At last, the ember caught. A small tongue of flame licked upward, fragile and wavering. The father fed it with twigs, then branches, until the shadows of his family stretched long across the ground. The grass around them glowed golden. The children, who only moments before had shivered in the cold, now felt the warmth upon their skin. The darkness retreated. The lions beyond the tall grass paused, wary of the flickering light. For one more night, the family had carved out a sanctuary within the wilderness. But fire was not only protection, it was transformation. Its light changed how they saw the world. In its glow, the savannah no longer seemed endless and hostile. It became smaller, contained within a circle of orange light. Beyond that circle lay uncertainty, danger, eyes glinting in the dark. Within it, there was safety, togetherness, the sense of being more than prey. Fire created a border between fear and courage, between helplessness and control. The children, their bellies still empty, quieted as they watched the flames dance. Their hunger remained, but in the light of fire, it seemed almost bearable, softened by the hypnotic flicker of shadows. Their small fingers reached out toward the warmth, learning its limits, feeling the heat and pulling back in awe. To them, fire was a living creature, wild, untamed, yet tamed enough to sit with them like a guardian. The elder began to murmur softly, his voice carrying stories that stretched back beyond memory. Fire and stories had always been entwined. One could not exist without the other. In its glow, words took shape, meaning was passed, the dead were remembered, the living reminded of who they were. The elder spoke of hunts long past, of storms survived, of ancestors who first dared to carry flame in their hands. His words wove shadows into myths, turning the night into a tapestry of memory and imagination. The family listened, not only with ears but with hearts. In the flickering light, they were more than hungry wanderers, they were heirs to something vast, something eternal. Fire gave them not only warmth but identity. It marked them as human. It separated them from the beasts that prowled outside the circle, waiting for weakness. To hold fire was to hold a fragment of the sun, to steal a piece of the gods. It was power beyond strength of limb or sharpness of tooth. Yet fire was also fragile. A careless movement, a sudden gust of wind, a forgotten ember, and it would die. The family knew this. They guarded it with vigilance, feeding it carefully, never allowing it to fall into neglect. Their lives were tethered to it as surely as to water or food. The father's hand hovered over the flames as if to reassure himself that it remained alive. The mother shielded the children from getting too close, knowing that the same fire that saved them could also destroy them. Around them, the savannah continued its own rhythm. In the distance, hyenas laughed, their voices carrying through the night. Lions shifted in the tall grass, restless and hungry. But none dared cross the barrier of fire. It was a magic older than memory, respected even by predators. The family, huddled close, felt for the first time that day a fragile sense of control. They were no longer running, no longer helpless in the dark. For a few hours, the world itself seemed to pause, held at bay by the fire's glow. As the night deepened, shadows grew longer, stranger. Faces flickered in the flames, illusions born of movement and imagination. The elder's voice wove with them, telling of spirits that lived in the fire, ancestors who returned in smoke, gods who spoke in sparks. The children, wide-eyed, listened with a mix of fear and wonder. In their minds, the fire was not simply protection but a doorway to another world, a connection to something unseen yet deeply felt. The mother, cradling her child, stared into the flames and thought of hunger. Fire did not fill the stomach, but it filled something else, the emptiness of despair. It gave them the strength to endure another night, the will to hope that tomorrow would bring food. Hunger had been their teacher, but fire was their comfort. Together, they balanced the scales of survival, pain and relief, emptiness and warmth, fear and courage. The father, his body silhouetted against the flames, closed his eyes for a moment. He imagined the hunt, the possibility of success, the taste of meat seared by fire. The thought was almost enough to steady him. Fire promised not only protection but transformation of food itself. Raw flesh became nourishment. Bitter roots became edible. Fire expanded the world of what could be consumed, reshaping the very boundaries of survival. Slowly, the night wore on. The family dozed in shifts, always one watching the flames, always one ensuring the fire lived. The stars wheeled overhead, silent witnesses to this fragile defiance against the dark. The predators circled but did not approach. And within their small glowing circle, the family held on to the most profound illusion of all, that for this night, they were safe. But fire carried another lesson, one less visible but just as powerful. It was the first technology, the first tool that shaped not just the environment but the mind. The savanna is never silent for long. Even when the fire keeps its circle of safety through the night, the family knows that beyond its flickering light lies a world ruled by predators. To live here is to live within the gaze of eyes that never blink, ears that never rest, and hunger that rivals their own. Humanity was not born as master of this land. Humanity was born as prey. And to be prey meant to walk always in shadow, to listen for every rustle, to measure every step against the possibility of death. The first predators were not abstractions. They were real, their bodies carved by evolution to dominate the very ground the family crossed. Lions, with shoulders thick as stone and teeth like knives, prowled the tall grass. Hyenas, cunning and tireless, moved in packs, their laughter echoing like mockery across the plains. Saber-tooths, their fangs gleaming like ivory daggers, lurked in the forests and river edges, ambushing the weak. Crocodiles lay silent in the waters, their eyes above the surface like shadows waiting to strike. And overhead, vultures circled, patient witnesses to the inevitable failure of the vulnerable. For the family, these creatures were not merely threats. They were teachers of a harsher kind than hunger. From the lions, they learned vigilance, never to walk carelessly, never to assume safety. From the hyenas, they learned the danger of numbers, that the pack is stronger than the lone hunter. From the saber-tooths, they learned fear, for no amount of courage could match such power head-on. From the crocodiles, they learned caution, that danger is often invisible until it strikes. From the vultures, they learned inevitability, that death is always watching, ready to descend. Each step across the savanna was a gamble. The tall grasses concealed movement, a sudden rustle could mean the wind, or it could mean the moment before a charge. The wind carried scents, the musk of lion, the sharp tang of blood, the sour stink of hyena, that warned or betrayed. Every sound was a signal, the alarm call of a bird, the silence of insects, the distant bellow of wildebeest. To survive, the family learned to read the land not as scenery but as language. Predators spoke through silence, through shadows, through the sudden shift of air. And the family listened, because not listening meant death. The children clung close to their mother, their eyes scanning the horizon even when they did not understand what they sought. Their bodies, small and fragile, could not outrun a lion, could not fight a hyena. But their fear was its own kind of education. They learned quickly to still their movements, to hush their cries, to recognize the cues in their parents' bodies, when to freeze, when to run, when to crouch in silence. Fear itself became an inheritance, passed down like fire, like hunger, like story. The father carried the weight of this reality most heavily. He knew his strength was small compared to the beasts. His stones could wound but not kill. His arms could strike but not overpower. Yet he also knew that survival was not measured in strength alone. It was measured in awareness, in cunning, in the ability to anticipate. The predators were stronger, but humanity had something else: patience, cooperation, the willingness to endure fear without surrendering to it. He could not fight the lion, but he could avoid it. He could not overpower the saber-tooth, but he could outlast it. The elder, his voice low and steady, reminded the family of this truth as they moved. He had seen others fall. He remembered the screams, the suddenness of attack, the way blood turned the earth dark. But he had also seen the cunning that saved them, families moving together, fires carried forward, voices raised in unison to drive predators back. Humanity's strength was not in teeth or claws but in unity. The predators reminded them daily of their fragility, but also of their resilience. For predators, too, lived by hunger. Their lives were not cruel for cruelty's sake. The lioness who prowled the grass did so not to torment, but to feed her cubs. The hyenas who circled the horizon laughed not in mockery, but in anticipation of a meal. The saber-tooth, fierce and solitary, stalked because its survival demanded it. The crocodile struck because its patient waiting had to end in violence. Every predator was a reflection of the same law that governed the family: to live is to take life. The difference was only in method, in weapon, in form. And so, as the family pressed on, their awareness of predators shaped their very being. Their bodies grew stronger through constant alertness. Their senses sharpened by necessity. Their minds learned to imagine danger before it appeared, to prepare for the unseen. Fear became instinct, but instinct became foresight. In this way, predators were not only threats, they were sculptors of the human mind. Without them, humanity might never have learned caution, strategy, or cooperation. The lions and hyenas were not only enemies but silent architects of intelligence. One evening, as the light faded and the fire had not yet been lit, the family heard it, a sound low and steady, like the rumble of the earth itself. A lion's growl. The children froze, their small hands clutching tightly. The mother gathered them close, her eyes scanning the grass. The father lifted a stone, though he knew it was no match. The elders. Breath slowed, his ears attuned to every rustle. The growl came again, closer this time, vibrating through the air. The family did not move. They knew the law: to flee was to trigger the chase, to run was to surrender. Silence was their only shield. For long moments, the predator circled unseen. Then, as suddenly as it had come, the growl receded, the sound fading into the vastness of the plains. The lion had chosen another path, another prey. Relief washed through the family, but not triumph. They knew the truth: this night they had been spared, but the lesson remained. Predators were always near. The land was theirs, not humanity's. And survival meant living within that reality, not pretending otherwise. As darkness fell and fire was finally kindled, the family huddled close, their eyes lingering on the horizon where the lion had been. In the firelight, shadows flickered across their faces, shadows of fear, shadows of resilience. They knew they would never conquer the predators, never banish them. But perhaps they did not need to. To live was not to dominate, but to endure within the teeth of the world. The first predators had taught them this: that life was fragile, that every step was risk, and that courage was not the absence of fear but the willingness to move forward despite it. In this way, predators shaped them, just as hunger shaped them, just as fire shaped them. They were not only humanity's enemies. They were humanity's crucible. And so the family walked on into the savannah night, fire in their hands, hunger in their bellies, predators in their memories. They were prey, yes. But they were prey who endured, prey who remembered, prey who dreamed. And in that endurance, that memory, that dream, they carried the seed of something even the greatest predator could not destroy. Fear is older than language. Long before the first words were shaped, before the first stories were told, fear already lived in the bones of humanity. It was the silent pulse that sharpened the senses, the invisible hand that guided every step across the savannah. For the family, fear was not weakness, it was memory, instinct, the invisible thread connecting them to all who had lived before. Fear was their teacher, their warning, and, paradoxically, their protector. In the daylight, fear took the shape of vigilance. Every rustle in the tall grass was a question. Every shadow across the plain was a possibility. The family learned to look without staring, to listen without moving, to breathe as softly as the wind itself. Fear whispered, "Do not forget that you are prey." It was a harsh lesson, but without it, they would not have survived even a single day. The children learned first through imitation. They saw their mother pause at the sound of a bird's alarm call. They noticed how their father's body stiffened when he scented the musk of lion on the breeze. They copied without understanding, their small frames crouching low when danger seemed near. In time, understanding would come. But for now, fear trained them not through reason, but through repetition. Their very survival depended on copying the gestures of the wary. The mother bore fear differently. To her, it was constant, a shadow that never left. She carried it not only for herself but for her children. Every step she took was measured against the safety of those who depended on her. Fear taught her caution, but it also taught her patience. She could not act rashly, could not afford mistakes. Even in moments of exhaustion, when her body longed to collapse, fear kept her moving. It reminded her that stopping meant vulnerability, that stillness could invite death. The father wrestled with fear in silence. His role demanded courage, demanded action, demanded risk. Yet fear was never absent. It crouched at the edge of his thoughts, whispering of claws, of teeth, of failure. He knew he was not stronger than the lion, not faster than the cheetah, not fiercer than the hyena. But fear did not paralyze him, it sharpened him. It forced him to plan, to watch the wind, to choose the ground of encounter carefully. Fear was not his enemy. It was his ally, the warning bell that kept recklessness at bay. The elder, though frail, knew fear most intimately. He had seen what happened when it was ignored. He remembered faces swallowed by the night, companions dragged into the tall grass, voices silenced by sudden violence. To him, fear was not shameful. It was wisdom. He taught the younger ones to respect it, to heed it, to never mistake bravery for foolishness. Fear, his cracked voice might whisper into the firelight, is the shadow that walks with you. Do not hate it. Do not deny it. Walk with it, and it will guide your steps. Fear, however, was more than individual sensation. It was collective. The family carried it together. A single cry from a child sent all hearts racing. A sudden alarm from the father spread instantly, no words needed. The group lived as one organism, their fear binding them together more tightly than hunger or fire. Fear created unity. It made them alert to one another's smallest movements, taught them to read each other's silence, to move as a single body when danger approached. The savannah itself reinforced these lessons. The cries of baboons high in the trees were signals. The sudden stillness of grazing antelope meant something had stirred the shadows. Even the patterns of birds in flight revealed hidden predators. Fear taught the family to read the world not as scenery but as message. Every sound, every silence, every shift of the wind was part of a language of survival. Those who failed to listen, failed to learn. And failure was always fatal. But fear, like hunger, also had a deeper gift. It did not only preserve life, it expanded imagination. The family began to anticipate threats before they appeared. They imagined predators where none were visible, dangers where none were yet present. This constant anticipation honed the mind, stretched it beyond the immediate moment. Fear became foresight. It allowed them to prepare, to build, to plan. In this way, fear was the first spark of strategy, the first stirrings of human thought beyond instinct. And yet, fear was also a weight. It drained the body, frayed the nerves, darkened the spirit. To live always under its shadow was exhausting. The children whimpered in their sleep, dreaming of unseen claws. The mother's shoulders tensed even in moments of stillness. The father's eyes darted constantly to the horizon. Fear kept them alive, but it also kept them from rest. And so, humanity learned another lesson, that survival was not only about enduring fear, but about finding ways to bear its burden. At night, fire was one answer. Its glow pushed back the darkness, gave them a fragile illusion of control. But even then, fear did not vanish. Beyond the circle of light, predators still waited. The fire could not silence the growls in the grass, the distant cries of hyenas. Instead, the fire transformed fear into story. The elder spoke, weaving the darkness into narrative, giving shape to the formless dread. In stories, fear became something shared, something named. And in naming it, they lessened its grip. Fear also birthed ritual. The family might chant softly in the night, their voices joining in rhythm, a human sound meant to remind predators that they were not silent prey. They might scatter ash at the edges of camp, or arrange stones, or make offerings of bone. These actions, whether effective or not, gave shape to fear. They turned it from endless dread into something tangible, something addressed. In ritual, fear became manageable. Still, the lesson remained, fear was eternal. It would never vanish, never be conquered. It was as much a part of humanity as breath. And perhaps that was its greatest truth. For without fear, there would have been no fire, no tools, no stories. Without fear, humanity would have walked blindly into the teeth of predators, unthinking, unprepared. Fear had carved intelligence from flesh. Fear had made imagination possible. Fear was not only a burden, it was the very root of what it meant to be human. One night, as the stars burned cold above, the family lay huddled close, their fire dwindling to embers. A lion roared in the distance, its voice rolling across the plains like thunder. The children clutched their mother, their small bodies trembling. The father tightened his grip on the stone at his side. The elder's breath slowed, his eyes glinting in the half-light. Fear pressed upon them all, heavy as the night itself. Yet within that fear was something else, endurance. For though they trembled, though they could not sleep, though every heartbeat felt like it might be their last, they endured. And endurance was the truest lesson of fear. To feel it and still move forward. To hear the roar and still rise with the dawn. To walk across the grasslands with eyes wide, with hearts racing, yet with feet unyielding. Fear did not stop them. It carried them. It shaped them. It made them human. Water was life, and thirst was the reminder of its absence. In the wide, sun-scorched lands of prehistory, water was more than a need, it was survival itself. Rivers, streams, and hidden springs were lifelines, drawing animals, shaping migration, and dictating where families could rest or where they must move. The family knew this truth deeply. Thirst was the most relentless of teachers, a force that bent their paths, slowed their steps, and carved fear into their very bones. The days without water were always the hardest. The air grew heavy, the earth cracked beneath their feet, and every breath felt sharp, as if inhaling fire. The children whimpered with dry mouths, their lips cracked and pale. Their mother carried them forward, though her own throat burned with the same need. Thirst humbled them all, from the eldest to the youngest, grinding strength away faster than hunger ever could. Hunger could be endured for days, but thirst demanded answer within hours. The father became the seeker. He read the land for clues, watched the flight of birds, traced the tracks of antelope, felt the dampness of the soil with his fingertips. Thirst sharpened his senses, made every detail urgent. A patch of greener grass might mean hidden moisture. A hollow in the rocks might cradle a pool left from the rains. His eyes scanned constantly, measuring the horizon not for predators, but for hope. Thirst turned him into both hunter and wanderer, forever chasing the shimmer of relief. The elder carried memory of water. He had walked these paths before, had tasted streams that no longer flowed, had knelt at springs that had since gone dry. His mind was a map, a record of where the land once yielded its hidden veins. But memory was both gift and sorrow, for water shifted with the seasons, and the land was never constant. Still, the family leaned on his knowledge, following his trembling hand when he pointed to distant hills, trusting that somewhere, beneath stone or shade, a chance for survival waited. When water was found, it was never taken lightly. A pool meant life not only for them, but for all creatures of the plains. The family approached carefully, their bodies low, their eyes searching. Waterholes were both sanctuary and trap. Thirst drew prey and predator alike to the same narrow ground. A lion might crouch in the reeds. Crocodiles might linger beneath the surface, patient and unseen. Hyenas might circle, waiting for weakness. To drink was to risk, yet not to drink was death. This was the cruel balance the family knew too well. The mother often drank last. She watched first, ensuring the children knelt safely, their hands cupped, their lips lowered to the pool with trembling urgency. The father kept watch, his stone raised, his eyes sharp, while she guarded with her presence. Only once the children's thirst was soothed did she allow her own body to lean forward, drawing in the coolness that felt like fire quenched. Even then, fear clung to the act, for at any moment the still surface could break, or the shadows could erupt with sudden violence. Thirst shaped their movements through the land. They could not stay long in one place, for water vanished quickly, drained by herds, evaporated by the sun. So they became wanderers, always moving from one source to the next, chasing clouds, following storms, reading the paths of animals that seemed to know where the earth still bled moisture. Water was not simply a drink, it was destiny, dictating their pace, their camp, their very survival. At night, when thirst still clawed at them, they dreamed of rivers. The children whispered of endless streams, their laughter bubbling like water itself. The elder spoke softly of times when rains came heavy, when the sky poured abundance and pools spread across the plains. These stories were more than comfort, they were lessons, reminders that drought and thirst were not eternal, that patience and endurance could carry them until the sky returned its gift. Yet water was more than need. It was memory, ritual, and meaning. To bathe in a stream was not only to cleanse but to feel alive again, to shake off the dust of the journey, to laugh in brief play. To gather at a pool was to share in something larger, to join the same rhythm that drew lions, antelope, birds, and insects. Water was the great equalizer, the gathering ground of life itself. And always, thirst returned. It was a cycle as old as humanity itself. Drink, endure, wander, and thirst again. Each time the lesson was the same: life was fragile, survival was fleeting, and the earth gave nothing freely. Water was gift and trial, blessing and danger. To follow it, to seek it, to risk everything for it, this was the story of humanity itself. One evening, after days of searching, the family stumbled upon a hidden spring in the rocks. The children cried out in relief, their voices echoing against the stone. The mother sank to her knees, scooping water with trembling hands, letting it cool the fire in her chest. The father lowered his head, drinking deeply, his body shaking with exhaustion. The elder smiled faintly, his eyes reflecting the surface of the pool, as if he had found again a piece of memory long feared lost. For a moment, thirst was silenced, and life returned to their limbs. But even in that moment of abundance, they knew the truth: the water would not last. Soon, it would fade, or be claimed by others. The lesson was not in the drinking but in the knowing, that thirst would come again, as it always had, as it always would. Humanity's story was not of endless rivers, but of endless seeking. And so, with their bellies cooled and their spirits briefly lifted, the family rose again, preparing to walk further into the vast, unyielding land. Water was life, and thirst was its shadow. Together they shaped the path of humankind, etching lessons into bone and blood, reminding each generation that survival was not given but earned, drop by precious drop. Fire was more than warmth. It was more than light. For this family, fire was the fragile border between safety and terror, between belonging and the endless dark. It crackled in the silence of night, its flames leaping and bending, painting their faces in flickering hues of orange and gold. It was not merely a tool, it was a companion, alive, unpredictable, demanding respect. Without fire, the family was exposed. With it, they held a fragile power that made them feel, for a moment, greater than the beasts that prowled around them. The fire's light cast shadows that stretched across the ground, dancing against rocks and trees, creating shapes that seemed to move on their own. The children watched with wide eyes, half afraid, half entranced. The shadows flickered like spirits, sometimes they looked like animals, sometimes like people. In the trembling glow, it was as if the ancestors themselves gathered in silence, drawn close to the warmth, their shapes appearing and vanishing with each spark. Fire was never just fire, it was memory, presence, and mystery. The elder sat nearest to the flames, his hands extended to feel their heat. He remembered a time before the family had learned to carry fire, when it was only stolen from lightning or the smoldering trees left after storms. To possess fire was to hold the sky's fury in their hands, to claim something once thought untouchable. His eyes reflected both gratitude and awe, for he knew what it meant to live without it, the endless fear of the dark, the cold that pierced the bones, the beasts whose glowing eyes surrounded them unseen. Fire was victory, proof that humanity had stolen something from the world that no claw or fang could match. The father tended the flames carefully. He fed it branches, bark, and dried grass, never allowing it to falter. He treated it as one would treat a fragile child, always needing care, always demanding vigilance. For he knew that once fire died, they would return to helplessness, swallowed by the dark. His hands bore small burns, marks of past mistakes, but he carried them as reminders of the balance between power and danger. Fire could protect, but it could also destroy. It was both weapon and warning. The mother sat with the children close to her, her eyes darting to the darkness beyond. Beyond the circle of light, the savannah was alive with unseen things, the snap of branches, the distant growl, the low cackling of hyenas. She listened intently, every sound magnified by the night. But the fire made her bold. Its smoke carried a smell that kept some predators at bay. Its crackle made the silence less suffocating. As long as the flames held, she believed they could endure until morning. For the children, fire was also wonder. They laughed at the sparks, tried to reach out for the glow, recoiled at the heat, and then reached again. It fascinated them, called to them with a promise of mystery. They played with their shadows, making shapes on the rocks, giggling at the strange figures that danced beside them. In fire, they saw not only safety but imagination, the seed of story. In its flickering light, they began to picture things beyond what was seen, beasts larger than any they knew, ancestors whispering in flame, gods hidden in sparks. Fire became the first storyteller. But shadows carried their own weight. In the darkness beyond the fire, eyes glimmered. Lions lingered at the edges of the circle, their golden eyes catching the faint glow, their bodies hidden in the tall grass. The family knew they were being watched. Fire did not erase danger, it only delayed it. The predators were patient, circling, waiting for weakness, for the flames to die. The family huddled close, aware that the night was always longer than their strength to keep the fire alive. The elder whispered faint sounds, not quite words but echoes of stories. He gestured toward the flames, his voice rising and falling like the crackle itself. The children listened, half dreaming, as he painted pictures with rhythm and tone. He spoke of great beasts defeated, of storms survived, of ancestors who carried fire across vast lands. In his voice, fire was no longer mere flame, it was a symbol of triumph, of endurance. The family sat in reverence, their fear eased by his murmured tales, the shadows becoming less menacing as they leaned into his rhythm. The night deepened. Above them, stars burned cold and endless, their light distant and indifferent. The fire was their answer to that vast emptiness, a small, fragile sun at the heart of the world, proof that humanity could create warmth against the universe's silence. In those hours, surrounded by predators and darkness, the family felt both small and powerful. Small against the immensity of night, powerful in the possession of fire that no beast could command. And yet, fire demanded cost. To keep it alive, someone must wake, must rise, must search for wood in the dark, risking the unseen. Sleep was broken, always shallow, always watchful. The father's eyes closed only briefly before snapping open again. The mother stirred restlessly, listening for danger. Even the elder, weary as he was, would sometimes rise and push a branch into the embers. Fire was not free. Its protection was fragile, its promise conditional. Still, as dawn began to stretch across the horizon, the fire remained. Its smoke curled upward into the pale sky, a thread between earth and heavens. The family rose from their circle, stiff but alive. Around them, the land awoke, the calls of birds, the distant thunder of hooves, the endless hum of life beginning anew. The lions had vanished with the night. The shadows had thinned. Fire had carried them through. For the family, fire was not just survival. It was identity. It set them apart from the creatures that stalked them. It gave them more than warmth and safety, it gave them belonging, story, meaning. In its light, they saw not only themselves but all who had come before, and all who would come after. Fire was humanity's mirror, showing them both their fragility and their strength. And as they moved on, leaving only ashes behind, they carried its memory in their minds, its embers in their souls. Wherever they would go, whatever trials awaited, the family knew this truth: as long as fire could be kindled, they were not helpless. As long as fire burned, shadows would never fully claim them. Hunger had carved its sharp edge into their bones, but the family knew that survival depended on more than waiting for chance, it demanded the hunt. The morning was quiet, the air still heavy with the coolness of night. The father rose before the sun fully broke the horizon, his body lean but his eyes alert, carrying with him the simple weapons shaped by countless generations. A sharpened stone lashed to a wooden shaft, a heavy rock balanced in his hand, these were not tools of dominance but of desperate hope. Against the great beasts of the land, they seemed laughably small. Yet humanity's strength had never been in claw or tooth, but in patience, cooperation, and silence. The hunt began not with movement but with listening. The father crouched low, his body pressed to the earth, ears straining for sound. The rustle of grass, the snap of a twig, the distant call of antelope, all were signals. The family joined him, even the children learning to still their restless bodies, to listen for the language of the land. Silence was their first weapon, for noise was betrayal. To hunt in these plains was not to chase but to vanish into the wind, to let the prey believe the world was empty. The elder's eyes, though clouded with age, scanned the distance with memory's guidance. He knew where animals would move at dawn, which watering places they circled, which paths they carved into the earth over seasons. His hand rose slowly, pointing toward a distant line of trees. It was there the herd would pass, as they had for countless generations. Though his body could no longer run, his knowledge was still part of the hunt. The family moved as shadows. Step by careful step, they pressed low against the tall grasses, their movements so deliberate that even the birds barely stirred. The father held his breath when the wind shifted, for scent could betray them more swiftly than sound. A wrong gust, and the herd would scatter into the horizon, faster than any human could follow. Silence was fragile, but it was their greatest ally. At last, they saw them, antelopes grazing, their heads lifting and lowering in rhythm, ears flicking at the faintest stir. The children's eyes widened, their hunger sharpening into hope. But the mother placed her hand gently on them, reminding them that hope must be tempered with patience. One wrong move, one eager rush, and all would be lost. Hunting was not fury. It was waiting, watching, becoming part of the land until the moment chose itself. The father's eyes narrowed, scanning the herd for weakness. There, a young antelope, smaller, lingering at the edge, slower in its movements. It was nature's cruel law that the weak fed the strong, that survival meant sacrifice. He signaled with the faintest tilt of his head, and the family understood. The elder whispered a breath, almost like a prayer, and the silent tension deepened. Closer. Step by step. Breath held. Muscles tight. The grass whispered against their skin, but they were careful, always careful. Every sense was alive, hearing the steady crunch of antelope jaws, smelling the musk of the herd, seeing the flick of tails. Silence was not emptiness, it was awareness so sharp it cut deeper than noise ever could. At the signal, the father moved. His arm lifted, his stone-tipped spear drawn back with a burst of strength gathered from days of restraint. The silence shattered in that instant, the swish of grass, the thud of feet, the cry of startled animals. The spear flew, cutting the air with a hiss, striking its mark not with the precision of certainty but with the desperate gamble of survival. The herd erupted, hooves pounding the earth like thunder, a storm of dust and motion. The children gasped, clutching their mother as the world transformed from stillness into chaos. The antelope leapt and scattered, but one stumbled, wounded, its body twisting in panic. The father ran forward, his breath harsh, his feet pounding. Silence was gone now, replaced by the chase. The elder called out, urging him with words sharp as the strike of stone. The family surged forward together, no longer hidden, no longer shadows, but hunters revealed. The struggle was brutal and swift. The father closed the distance, driving another stone into the creature's flank. The animal cried out, fierce even in weakness, kicking against its fate. The mother joined, her hand steady as she struck, not out of cruelty but necessity. The elder raised his arms in a trembling shout, summoning all his remaining strength to add to the moment. Even the children, watching with wide, fearful eyes, felt the weight of the kill, not as spectators, but as inheritors of a burden carried since time began. Then, silence returned. The herd was gone, dust hanging in the air, the plains settling once more. At their feet lay the fallen antelope, its eyes dimming, its body still trembling with the last fragments of life. The family stood around it, breathing heavily, their bodies shaking from effort and relief. Hunger had driven them to this moment, and now hunger would be answered. The father knelt, his hand resting briefly on the animal, a gesture of both respect and possession. The mother closed her eyes, whispering to herself words that were not speech but something deeper, a rhythm of gratitude, a recognition that life had passed into their keeping. The elder sat down heavily, exhaustion etched into his frame, yet pride glimmering faintly in his expression. The children stared, silent, sensing that this moment was sacred, that it was more than meat. The silent hunt had become a storm, and now it was still again. The family had risked everything, had poured their frailty into one act of unity, and had prevailed. They would eat. They would live another day. And though the silence had been broken, its lesson lingered, that survival was not only strength or speed, but patience, presence, and the ability to vanish until the right moment arrived. As the sun climbed higher, they began to prepare the kill, their hands working quickly, their eyes always alert to the horizon. For they knew the truth: silence might win them food, but it could not keep danger away. Other eyes watched the plains. Other hungers circled near. The hunt was not the end of struggle, only the beginning of another test. Yet for now, the silence was theirs again, and in it, the taste of victory was sharper than hunger. The family's victory over hunger was brief. On the savannah, no kill belonged fully to those who made it. Meat was a prize that drew not only nourishment but danger, for every predator watched the land with the same relentless hunger. And as the family crouched around the fallen antelope, beginning to carve and tear, other eyes had already fixed upon them. The air itself seemed to change, thicker, heavier, vibrating with the unseen presence of hunters who were never far away. The father's hands worked quickly, stripping flesh from bone with the sharpened stone. His movements were not celebratory but frantic. Each slice was made with urgency, every moment measured against the knowledge that time was short. The mother gathered what she could, passing scraps to the children, her own hunger gnawing but held back. The elder's hands trembled as he pulled at the sinew, chewing greedily even as his eyes darted toward the horizon. All of them knew: the smell of blood was an announcement, a signal carried on the wind, a call to those whose teeth were sharper and whose strength was greater. The first to arrive were the vultures. They descended from the sky in wide, circling arcs, their wings casting shadows over the family. Their cries were harsh, impatient, mocking. They spiraled lower and lower, waiting for the moment when the humans would falter. The children looked upward, fear and fascination mingling in their wide eyes. The mother hissed softly, pulling them closer, as if her body could form a wall against the sky. But vultures were only the beginning. On the edges of the grass, hyenas began to appear. Their shapes emerged first as shadows, then as bodies, slinking low, their spotted hides blending with the earth. Their laughter carried across the plain, a sound that was neither mirth nor madness, but hunger sharpened into sound. They watched with bold, calculating eyes, waiting for hesitation. The father shouted, baring his teeth, raising his bloodied stone high. For a moment, the hyenas halted, but they did not leave. They never left. Then, deeper in the grass, came the rumble, the low, steady growl that spoke of greater danger. Lions. The true lords of the savannah, whose patience was endless, whose confidence came from knowing that nothing, not even fire, could hold them back forever. The sound froze the family. The father's chest tightened, his breath caught. The mother clutched the children close, their small bodies trembling against her. The elder closed his eyes, murmuring a faint, broken sound, half prayer, half despair. The lions had heard the kill. They would not be denied. The family's joy at their meal curdled into terror. The father looked at the carcass, at the meat still clinging to its bones, and made his choice. He hacked fiercely, ripping free as much as he could, blood soaking his arms, sweat stinging his eyes. The mother gathered what he threw to her, stuffing it into skins, into bundles made from grass, anything that could carry food away. The children held pieces in their trembling hands, unsure whether to eat or to flee. Time was slipping through their fingers as surely as blood soaked into the ground. The hyenas crept closer, emboldened by the growls from the grass. Their numbers grew, their cackles rising, filling the air with the sound of inevitability. They snapped their jaws, loping back and forth, testing the family's resolve. The father shouted again, striking a stone against another, sending sparks into the air. For a brief instant, the hyenas pulled back, wary of the sudden light. But they did not retreat far. They were predators in waiting, and they knew patience was on their side. Then the lions appeared. Their golden bodies slipped from the tall grass like living shadows, muscles rippling beneath sleek fur, eyes fixed on the prize. They moved without hurry, as though certain of their claim. The father's shout faltered in his throat. The mother tightened her grip on the children until they whimpered. The elder's breathing grew shallow, his frail chest rising and falling too quickly. They all knew what this meant: the kill was no longer theirs. Yet desperation gave them courage. The father stood tall, raising his arms high, blood dripping from his skin, his body making itself as large as it could. He bellowed into the air, a sound more animal than human, a cry of defiance that shook his chest. The lions paused, their tails flicking, their eyes narrowing. For a moment, predator and prey stared across the narrow distance, the savanna holding its breath. Then one lion roared, its voice splitting the air, and the balance was broken. The family staggered back, clutching what little they had managed to save. The father shouted again, swinging his stone, but the lions moved forward, steady, confident. The hyenas circled wider now, sensing chaos, eager to snatch whatever scraps might fall. The vultures screamed from above, diving lower, impatient for the feast. The land itself seemed to close in, pressing the family into a shrinking circle of fear. At last, the father made the only choice left. He turned, motioning fiercely to the family, his voice low and urgent. They must flee. The mother gathered the children, pressing meat into their hands, urging them to run. The elder rose with difficulty, clutching a piece of sinew, his legs trembling but his spirit unwilling to surrender. They moved together, their steps uneven, their bodies heavy with loss. Behind them, the lions claimed the carcass, their roars echoing across the plain. The hyenas surged in, snapping at scraps, fighting for what the kings of the savanna left behind. The vultures dropped from the sky, filling the air with wings and shrieks. The family ran, clutching their fragments of meat, their breaths ragged, their hearts pounding. The taste of victory had turned to ash, but still they carried something. It was not enough to banish hunger forever, but it was enough to keep them alive for another day. And survival was the only victory that mattered. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the savanna, the family huddled together, their meager spoils clutched tightly, their bodies pressed close. The father stared into the distance, his jaw tight, his eyes haunted by the knowledge that they had stood in the lion's den and escaped. The mother soothed the children with gentle touches, her voice soft against their fear. The elder gazed at the horizon, his eyes reflecting both sorrow and pride. They had risked everything, and though they had lost the greater share, they had survived. The predators had waited, and the predators had taken, but the family had not been swallowed whole. Their hunger was eased, if only for now. Tomorrow, the hunt would begin again. And always, beyond the edges of their firelight, predators would be waiting. The savanna quieted after the chaos of the hunt. The lions fed in the distance, their roars echoing like thunder, while the hyenas and vultures picked at scraps in their shadow. The family, though alive, carried more than just the weight of hunger. They carried the whisper of death that had stalked them through the day, a presence that lingered long after the predators had vanished from sight. It clung to them like smoke, pressing into their bones, refusing to leave. They moved slowly, away from the carcass, the sky burning orange with the setting sun. The father's steps were heavy, each stride pulled down by the burden of survival. His arms still dripped with the blood of the antelope, drying now into a sticky film. His eyes remained fixed ahead, but within them lay the reflection of lions, golden eyes, sharp teeth, a power that mocked his defiance. He had stood against them, and though he had not been consumed, he knew the line between life and death was thinner than the edge of his stone blade. The mother held the children close, her arms wrapped around them like branches bent against a storm. She whispered soothing sounds, but her voice trembled. She had felt the hot breath of danger brush against her skin, had seen the way the lions moved without fear, had heard the laughter of hyenas promising death in the dark. The children, too, had sensed it. They clutched the scraps of meat, their small fingers tight, their wide eyes darting to every sound in the grass. Childhood offered no shield in this world. Even innocence was prey. The elder shuffled behind, his frail body struggling against the weight of both age and fear. His hands shook, not only from weakness but from the memory of what had been lost. He had seen too many seasons to mistake survival for safety. The predators would return. Death always returned. And though he walked with them, part of his soul had already stepped beyond. His breaths were shallow, his eyes clouded, but his mind was sharp with memory. He carried with him stories of those who had fallen, the brother taken by a lion, the child lost to sickness, the mother swallowed by the river's current. Death had never been a stranger. Death was family. As night crept over the savannah, the air grew colder, the colors of the land fading into shadows. The family found a patch of trees, their branches twisting upward like skeletal hands. Here, they gathered wood, striking stones together until sparks caught and flame was born. Firelight danced across their faces, chasing away the dark, but not the whispers. For in the silence between crackles, death spoke. It spoke in the rustle of the grass, where unseen creatures moved. It spoke in the distant roar of lions, their bellies full yet their presence eternal. It spoke in the eyes of vultures perched above, waiting, patient, knowing that flesh always yielded to time. It spoke in the coughing breath of the elder, each rattle a reminder that the body's fire burned only so long. The father sat near the flames, his face hard, his gaze fixed into the night. He replayed the moment when he had raised his arms against the lions, when their eyes had locked. He had felt power in that instant, but also futility. Man was not yet master here. They were intruders on a land where beasts ruled, where claws and teeth decided fate. His jaw clenched as he thought of the future. Could they survive this endless balance? Or would their bones join the countless others scattered across the earth, unmarked, forgotten? The mother cradled the children, pressing her lips to their hair, breathing in their scent as if to memorize it. She knew too well how fragile they were, how quickly life could be stolen. She remembered her first child, the one who had not survived past the first rains. The ache of that loss had never left her, and tonight, as death whispered again, she feared its hand would reach once more. She hummed softly, a broken lullaby, not to soothe the children but to silence her own dread. The elder lifted his head, his eyes reflecting the fire. His voice, cracked and weary, rose into the night. He spoke not in words meant for the family alone, but for the land, for the spirits, for the unseen watchers. He spoke of the endless cycle, of life hunted by hunger, of hunger hunted by death, of death feeding life again. His words carried the weight of generations, a truth as old as the stones beneath them. The lion takes, the hyena waits, the vulture circles, he rasped. And we, too, must take, must wait, must circle. We are not outside the circle. We are inside it. The children listened, their eyes wide, not fully understanding but sensing the gravity in his voice. They did not yet know the meaning of mortality, but they felt its shadow pressing close. They clung tighter to their mother, seeking warmth not from the fire but from her heartbeat. The fire crackled louder, as if mocking their fear. The flames were small, fragile, threatened by the slightest breath of wind. The father fed it with careful hands, knowing the darkness beyond its glow was thick with dangers. Hyenas prowled in the distance, their laughter cutting through the night like knives. Owls hooted from above, their wings slicing the air in silence. The night had taken one of them, and grief lingered like a shadow too heavy to shake. Yet as the family rose and gathered what little remained, their eyes turned to the single force that had kept the dark at bay, the fire. It had burned against the lions, glowed against the hyenas, flickered in the face of vultures circling overhead. Fire was not just warmth or light. To them, fire was survival itself, the one shield humankind could lift against a world that towered above them in claw, fang, and wing. The embers still glowed faintly in the morning mist, their soft reds hidden beneath the ash. The father bent low, coaxing them back to life. His hands, roughened by stone and struggle, shielded the fragile sparks as he fed them thin twigs. He blew gently, breath after breath, until orange flames leapt once more. The children watched with wide eyes, captivated by the rebirth. Fire was alive to them, restless, unpredictable, both friend and danger. They felt its heat on their faces and instinctively leaned closer, drawn to it the way moths are drawn to light. For the mother, fire was more than a tool. It was a promise. She remembered nights without it, nights when the darkness pressed so close it felt suffocating, when every sound in the grass was a threat. Without fire, they were prey. With it, they had hope. She placed dry branches carefully, feeding the flames with reverence, as if tending to a fragile spirit. The fire crackled in return, its voice filling the silence, pushing back the weight of loss that had threatened to crush them at dawn. The elder had known this truth better than any of them. Though his body had failed, his teachings lived on in the crackle of the flames. He had always said fire was more than warmth, it was memory. It carried the power of the sun into the night. It transformed raw flesh into food, fear into courage, darkness into watchfulness. Now, even in his absence, the family felt his wisdom reflected in every flicker. As they sat around the flame, they remembered him. Fire held his voice, his lessons, his spirit. As the day stretched forward, they carried fire with them. A burning branch, its end glowing hot, was wrapped in bark and held aloft by the father. The children marched behind, their eyes fixed on it as though it were a torch guiding them through an endless maze. Every step was made lighter by its presence. Where the fire burned, the world seemed less vast, less hostile. It was as if the flame bent the savanna slightly in their favor, if only for a moment. By dusk, they reached another patch of trees, their branches gnarled and reaching toward the sky. The family settled there, arranging stones in a circle, preparing another hearth. The father struck sparks, the mother nursed the flames, and soon fire lived again, this time taller and stronger. Its glow stretched outward, casting jagged shadows across the ground. The predators came, as they always did. Hyenas first, their laughter splitting the night like cruel music. They lingered at the edges of the firelight, their eyes reflecting orange. The children gasped and clung to their mother, but the father lifted the burning branch high, thrusting it toward the beasts. The hyenas skittered back, their courage fading at the sight of the living flame. They circled, whining, but did not dare to cross into the light. Later, lions padded close. Their roars rolled like thunder, shaking the air. Their massive shapes prowled the darkness, their eyes steady, unblinking. Yet even they paused at the fire. They lowered their bodies, tails twitching, but none stepped forward. They knew the flame. They feared it, even if only slightly. Fire was the one thing that tilted the balance. Teeth and claw ruled the day, but fire ruled the night. The mother felt her chest loosen as she watched the predators hesitate. For once, it was not her arms, nor the father's spear, nor the elder's words that kept them safe. It was the fire, the shield that needed no strength, no speed, no courage. Its crackle was a lullaby, its glow a fortress. For the first time in many nights, she allowed herself to breathe deeply, to feel not only fear but something else, something like faith. Around the fire, the family found more than safety. They found story. As flames leapt, the father began to mimic the lions, his shoulders hunched, his teeth bared, his voice a deep growl. The children laughed, their fear dissolving into giggles. The mother clapped softly, encouraging him, while even she felt a smile tug at her lips. Fire made space for such moments. Without it, laughter would have felt reckless, dangerous. With it, laughter became resistance. It became proof that life was still theirs to hold, even in the shadow of death. As the night wore on, the flames painted their faces in shifting gold. The children's eyes grew heavy, lulled by the rhythm of the fire. The mother sang softly, her voice weaving with the crackles, until the little ones drifted into sleep. The father kept watch, the glowing branch still in his hand, while the mother rested against him, her body weary but her heart steady. The fire became their heartbeat, pulsing through the night. Every pop, every spark reminded them that they were not powerless. They could not outmatch the lions in strength, nor outrun the hyenas, nor soar like the vultures. But with fire, they had something no other creature held. They had a weapon not born of claw or tooth, but of mind and patience. Fire was not given, it was made. And in that making, humankind had carved a path through the impossible. When dawn arrived, the predators slipped back into the grass, their eyes still glinting with hunger but their bodies unwilling to challenge the flame. The family rose again, their fire now embers once more. They gathered it carefully, shielding it from the wind, ensuring its survival. The children carried small sticks blackened by the night's blaze. They waved them proudly, their soot-covered fingers marking them as keepers of the flame. The mother touched their heads, smiling faintly. She knew that one day, those same hands would tend the fire for their own children. Fire was not only a shield against predators, it was a legacy. It was the thread that bound the elder to them, and them to those yet to come. As they set out once more, the sun rose higher, indifferent as always. But the family no longer felt entirely exposed beneath its glare. They carried something that made them different, something that allowed them to walk through a world of predators and still stand tall. Fire was not only survival, it was defiance. It was hope. It was the shield that turned prey into something more. And though the savannah whispered still with the voices of death, the family walked forward knowing that for tonight, and perhaps for many nights to come, they carried a light no shadow could overcome. The savannah is a stage, and every actor upon it plays a part written by hunger. Lions, hyenas, vultures, wild dogs, jackals, even the silent crocodiles in distant rivers, each one waits, each one watches, each one survives by taking from another. It is a circle as old as the first dawn, and the family walked within it, never outside of it, never safe from its pull. The father knew this truth as he moved across the dry plain, the firebrand in his hand smoldering faintly. The predators were never far. Their eyes glowed in the darkness, their footprints lingered in the dust, their cries echoed through the night. Even in daylight, when the sun beat mercilessly, the circle did not break. Hyenas skulked in the grasses, lions lazed in the shade, vultures drifted lazily in the skies. Each of them waited. Each of them fed when another failed. For the family, the circle was not just an idea. It was a reality carved into their days. They ate only when another creature fell. They lived only when they could take from the same cycle that threatened to consume them. The antelope had given them life, but only because lions had taken it first. Even fire, their great shield, did not free them from the circle. It only delayed the inevitable. The mother understood this most deeply as she held the children's hands and kept them close. She watched the scavengers in the sky, black wings wheeling endlessly overhead, and saw in them the truth of existence. No creature escaped the circle. Even the lions, proud and fierce, would one day stumble, grow weak, and collapse. And when they did, the vultures would descend, their sharp beaks tearing into what once ruled. Power was temporary. Flesh was fleeting. Only the circle endured. The children, though young, began to sense it too. Their laughter was quieter now, their play more cautious. They learned to read the sky, to recognize the cry of a hyena or the deep rumble of a lion. They knew which shadows to fear and which sounds meant danger. Childhood in the savannah was not protected, it was sharpened. They were being shaped into creatures who could walk the circle without being swallowed whole. At night, around the fire, the father and mother whispered stories to them, stories that were not yet language as we know it, but images painted with sound and gesture. They mimicked the lion's roar, the vulture's wing beat, the hyena's cackle. They showed how the circle turned, how every creature fed upon another, how life was taken and given in the same breath. The children listened, their eyes reflecting firelight, their minds absorbing the lesson like dry earth absorbing rain. The elder, before he had gone, had told them something the father now repeated in broken phrases: "We live because others die. Others live because one day, we will die." It was not said with sorrow but with certainty, as though it was the one truth that held the world together. Now, each night, when the flames cracked and the predators circled, the family remembered those words. They carried them like an invisible fire within, a torch passed from one generation to the next. The savannah did not soften its lessons. At dawn, they found the remains of another herd animal, a zebra, torn apart, its ribs jutting upward like broken spears. The lions had fed and moved on, leaving scraps for hyenas and vultures. The family scavenged what was left, stripping sinew, gnawing marrow, grateful for anything. The children wrinkled their noses at the smell, but hunger silenced protest. The circle did not care for taste, only survival. As they ate, the vultures descended in a storm of black wings, screeching, flapping, demanding their share. The father waved his firebrand, but still they swooped low, their eyes bright with hunger. The children clutched the meat tighter, fear flashing in their eyes as the air filled with the chaos of wings. The mother pulled them close, shielding them beneath her arms. For a moment, it seemed even the fire might not be enough. Then, as suddenly as they had descended, the vultures shifted upward, their attention stolen by a new shadow. Hyenas emerged from the grasses, their bodies low, their laughter rising. The family froze, knowing the fire would protect them but also knowing they stood at the edge of danger. The circle had drawn tight, predators and scavengers crowding in, each one fighting for scraps. The family was only one more participant in the endless cycle. The father lifted the fire high, its flames snapping defiantly. The hyenas snarled but kept their distance, pacing, waiting, testing. They would not risk the fire tonight. They knew the circle was vast, that patience would yield another chance. They melted back into the grasses, their laughter fading, leaving only the family and the vultures. The father's arm trembled from holding the fire aloft so long, but he did not lower it until the last wing had disappeared into the sky. When silence returned, the mother looked at her children and whispered a sound that meant both warning and lesson. She pointed at the ground, at the zebra bones, at the vultures above, at the grasses where hyenas had prowled. She drew a circle in the dirt with her finger. The children nodded, their young faces serious, their eyes following the line of her hand. They understood, in their way, that this was the world they lived in. A circle that could not be broken. That night, when the fire burned again, the father spoke less and the mother held the children closer. They were tired, their bellies filled but their spirits heavy. Around them, the savannah pulsed with life, owls hooted, insects hummed, lions roared in the distance. The circle moved onward, indifferent, unbroken. The family sat in silence, staring into the flames, each lost in thought. The father wondered how long they could keep walking within the circle before it closed on them. The mother thought of the elder, whose body now fed the earth, whose spirit still lingered in their fire. The children dreamed of lions, of hyenas, of wings that blotted out the sun. And yet, beneath the weight of fear and hunger, there was a strange comfort. They were not alone in this struggle. Every creature around them fought the same battle, played the same role, walked the same circle. The lions roared not in cruelty but in need. The hyenas laughed not in malice but in hunger. Even the vultures, sharp and merciless, were only turning the wheel. The family, fragile as they were, belonged to that will too. And though they could not break the circle, they carried something that made them different. They carried memory. They carried fire. They carried the ability to tell the story of the circle, to pass it on, to shape it in ways no lion or hyena ever could. The circle was unbroken, but within it, a spark glowed, small, fragile, human. Hunger is not simply an emptiness in the belly. It is a presence, a shadow that follows each step, whispering in the ears of the living. It changes the way the eyes see, sharpening every glance for movement, every flicker of life in the grasses. It changes the way the mind thinks, narrowing thoughts into a single desperate thread: find food. Survive. Endure. For the family, hunger had become more than a condition, it was a companion, a stalker, a silent predator as real as the lions and hyenas. The father felt it in the tightness of his chest, in the way his muscles resisted when he rose from the ground. His legs trembled not from fear but from weakness. The meat scavenged from the zebra had been a reprieve, but it was gone now, and the gnawing void returned fiercer than before. Every step forward seemed heavier, every breath more ragged. He gripped his spear with whitened knuckles, not for defense alone but as if holding it might anchor him against collapse. The mother carried hunger differently. She bore it not only in her own body but in the worried glances she cast toward the children. Their faces, once round with youth, had grown hollow, their eyes too large for their cheeks. They moved slower now, dragging their feet, their voices subdued. She felt their hunger as her own, doubled and sharpened, cutting her deeper than any claw could. She tried to mask her fear with murmurs and soft touches, but hunger gave her away. Her ribs showed beneath her skin, her arms shook as she lifted the smallest child to her hip. The children themselves were learning the shape of hunger. Their games had shifted, no longer did they chase one another with laughter. Instead, they crouched in the dirt, mimicking the motions of the hunt they had seen: a stalking lion, a scavenging hyena. They whispered to each other of food, of meat, of berries and roots that had once filled their mouths but now felt like dreams. Hunger had become their playmate, a silent rule in their growing world. The elder, though gone, lingered in their thoughts. He had often said hunger was the truest teacher. Hunger drove the body to endure, the mind to create, the spirit to sharpen. Without hunger, he had told them, there was no fire, no stone blade, no courage to stand against the lions. Now, as the family stumbled through the savannah, his words rang true in their bones. Hunger was teaching them still, but the lesson was cruel. The land offered little mercy. The grasses rattled in the dry wind, the ground cracked beneath their steps. The rivers had shrunk to shallow trickles, where crocodiles lurked in still pools waiting for the desperate. The air shimmered with heat by day, chilled sharply by night. Everywhere the family turned, hunger greeted them. A carcass too old, stripped bare by scavengers. A fruit tree barren, its branches empty. The bones of animals widening under the sun, silent markers of where hunger had triumphed before. At dusk, when the fire was lit once again, the family huddled close, the flames painting their gaunt faces in restless gold. The children chewed on scraps of sinew, more to trick their bellies than to feed them. The mother passed morsels to them first, keeping little for herself. The father stared into the fire, his eyes sunken, his jaw clenched against despair. Fire could keep predators away, but it could not drive off hunger. Hunger sat with them at the circle of flame, patient, smiling, unmovable. The night stretched long, filled with the familiar calls of the savannah, the hyena's laugh, the lion's roar, the shriek of owls. Yet the family heard them differently now. Each sound was not only danger but possibility. The roar of lions meant prey had fallen. The laughter of hyenas meant meat lay somewhere nearby. Even the circling of vultures by day became a beacon of hope. Hunger made them listen more closely, their senses sharpened by need. But it also clouded their judgment, pushing them toward risks they would not otherwise take. The father rose before dawn, moving silently from the camp. His body ached, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the horizon. Hunger walked with him, whispering insistently, "Go farther. Go faster. Find what lies hidden." He followed tracks in the dirt, faint prints of antelope hooves leading toward the scrubland. His pace quickened, his heart pounding not only with exertion but with the thrill of possibility. But the tracks ended in nothing, fading into dust. His shoulders sagged, and hunger laughed softly in his ear. When he returned, the mother was awake, her arms wrapped tightly around the children. She read his failure in his face before he spoke. Her own hunger deepened at the sight, but she said nothing. Words wasted strength. She only leaned against him briefly, their bodies thin but still warm together. They both knew tomorrow would demand more, that hunger would not release them, not yet. The children stirred and whined, their voices weak with fatigue. The mother hushed them with gestures, pointing toward the fire, encouraging them to gather twigs. It was a ritual that gave them purpose, something to do besides dwell on the emptiness inside. They obeyed sluggishly, their small hands collecting dry sticks, feeding the flame with effort disproportionate to its size. Fire gave them pride, however small, a victory over the shadows, even as hunger grinned unseen. By midday, the family's pace slowed. They stopped often, crouching in the shade of acacias, gasping for air. The mother searched for roots, digging at the ground with a stone, but the soil was too hard, the earth too dry. The father scanned for birds or small creatures, but the grasses yielded nothing. Time stretched, hunger deepened, and silence pressed heavily on them. The mother's thoughts turned inward, to memories of seasons past when rains had come, when herds had gathered thick and plentiful. She remembered the sweetness of berries, the fat of marrow, the laughter of children who were now only ghosts. Those memories burned in her chest, crueler than any emptiness, because they made the present feel even harsher. Yet she clung to them too, for they reminded her why she walked still, why she endured. Hunger's shadow could not erase love, not entirely. That night, as the fire burned low, the father stared into the dark, listening to the lion's roar. He clenched his spear and whispered to himself, a sound without words, more growl than language. It was not prayer, not yet. It was defiance. Hunger would not silence him, not while his family still breathed. He pressed the firebrand into the earth, its sparks leaping skyward, as if marking his vow. The mother watched him, her heart torn between fear and faith. She knew hunger might drive him too far, push him into the lion's den again, or worse. Yet she also knew that without that fire in his chest, without that refusal, they would wither and collapse. Hunger's shadow was heavy, but it could not extinguish the human flame, not yet. As dawn bled across the horizon, the family rose again, gaunt, weary, but still moving. Hunger followed, close as their own shadows. It whispered with every step, it mocked with every breath, but the family endured. For hunger could take strength, could take laughter, could take the elder, but as long as the fire burned and footsteps carried forward, it could not take everything. They walked on, thinner, slower, but alive. And in their survival, even under the heaviest shadow, there was a light hunger could not touch. Hunting was never a certainty, it was always a gamble, a throw of the dice against the vastness of nature. For the family, it was not about glory or conquest, it was about survival. Each attempt carried with it the possibility of death, not just for the prey but for the hunters themselves. Hunger pressed them toward that gamble once more, a gamble they could no longer postpone. The father's decision came with the first light of dawn. He rose from the ashes of their small fire, spear in hand, his silhouette etched against the gray horizon. His jaw was tight, his eyes hollow yet burning with grim purpose. He knew the odds, he had seen hunters fall to horns, hooves, and claws. He had watched the savannah claim lives for less. But hunger was relentless, and to sit idle was to die slowly. The family could not endure another day of emptiness. He would gamble, not because he wished to, but because there was no other choice. The mother read his intent without words. She caught his arm briefly before he left, her eyes locking onto his with both fear and faith. She knew he might not return, that the children might be left with only her. Yet she also knew what must be done. Her grip was not to hold him back, but to steady him, to remind him of the faces that waited by the fire. Her own hunger twisted in her belly, but it was nothing compared to the dread of watching him walk into danger. The children watched silently, their wide eyes following him as he strode away. They had learned enough to understand what a hunt meant, what it cost. They had seen blood, both animal and human. They had heard the cries of pain when prey fought back. Yet in their innocence, there was also hope, hope that he would return with meat, that tonight their bellies would be full. The father moved with care, his steps deliberate, each footfall a silent prayer to the earth. His ears strained for the sound of movement, for the rustle of prey in the grass. He knew the land as if it were etched into his bones, where the herd sometimes grazed, where the streams drew animals to drink, where the thickets offered cover. He followed faint tracks in the dust, hooves, smaller than zebra, heavier than gazelle. Antelope, perhaps. A chance, however small. The savanna was both ally and enemy. The tall grasses concealed him, but they also concealed dangers. He crouched low, pausing often, his spear balanced in his hand. His breath was slow, measured. Hunger made him shaky, but desperation sharpened his focus. Every movement of grass, every shadow in the morning light could mean life or death. And then he saw them. A small group of antelope, delicate creatures with slender legs and twitching ears, grazing near a patch of scrub. His heart pounded at the sight. Meat. Flesh that could keep his family alive. But they were fast, faster than his weary limbs could manage. To chase would be folly. He needed cunning, not speed. He crouched, studying the land, searching for advantage. The wind shifted, carrying his scent. One antelope raised its head, ears flicking nervously. He froze, his body as still as stone. The gamble had begun. One wrong move and the chance would vanish like smoke. Minutes stretched like hours. He inched closer, the grasses brushing against his skin. His muscles tensed, the spear heavy in his hand. He remembered the elders' lessons: aim for the chest, just behind the shoulder, strike not in haste but with purpose. The antelope lowered its head again, chewing slowly. He hurled the spear. The sound of its flight was like a crack of thunder in the silence. The antelope leapt, but not quickly enough. The spear struck, sinking deep into flesh. A cry tore through the air, high and sharp, and the herd scattered in a storm of hooves and dust. The struck antelope staggered, blood darkening its side, before collapsing into the grass. The father sprinted forward, every last shred of strength driving him on. The kill was his. But the gamble was not yet over. The scent of blood spread quickly, a signal to every predator on the savanna. Lions could come, or hyenas, or wild dogs. He knew he had little time. He knelt by the fallen antelope, his hands trembling as he pulled the spear free. Blood gushed over his fingers, hot and sticky. He worked quickly, slicing with his stone blade, tearing meat from bone, filling a sling made of hide. His breath came fast, not from exertion but from urgency. The savanna would not let him linger. A roar echoed faintly in the distance. His chest tightened. The lions had smelled it. He glanced around, eyes scanning the grasses, the horizon. Nothing yet, but they would come. The gamble had paid off, but only if he could carry the prize home. He heaved the meat onto his back, staggering under its weight. His legs shook, his body screamed for rest, but he forced himself forward. Each step was a battle. Hunger gnawed still, but now it was laced with adrenaline, with fear. The grass rustled behind him, and his head whipped around. For a moment he thought he saw movement, shadows stalking, eyes gleaming, but the grass settled. Was it his imagination, or were predators truly near? He could not wait to find out. The journey back stretched longer than it should have. The fire had always been more than warmth, more than light. It was a teacher, a silent storyteller, an ancient voice that spoke in crackles and sparks. For the family, it was their oldest companion, older than memory, older than any elder's tale. Around its glow, the shadows of the world seemed less cruel, less vast. And in its flicker, lessons were passed, not in carved words or painted symbols, but in glances, gestures, murmured stories. That night, after the gamble of the hunt had paid off, the fire burned brighter than it had in many moons. Fat dripped into the flames from the antelope meat, making the sparks leap like wild stars. The children huddled close, their bellies full for the first time in days, their faces softening with relief. Their eyes glittered as they stared into the shifting dance of flames, as if the fire itself were alive, whispering secrets to them. The father sat near, his spear laid across his knees, his body heavy with exhaustion. Yet even in his weariness, he knew the fire demanded attention. He leaned forward, feeding it with careful hands, arranging the sticks so the flames would last until dawn. His movements were steady, practiced. The elder had taught him that fire must be treated with respect, as one would treat a spirit. Neglect it, and it dies. Anger it, and it punishes. But honor it, and it protects. The mother joined him, her hands busy with the children. She tore small strips of meat for the youngest, speaking softly so their chewing would not be rushed. She soothed their tired whimpers, wiping grease from their mouths, her movements tender and rhythmic. She too understood fire's lessons. The flame was patience, persistence, care. Without those, it dwindled into nothing but ash. When the children's hunger was calmed, the father straightened, his eyes catching the firelight. He gestured toward the flames, pointing with the charred end of a stick. The children leaned forward, their curiosity stirred. This was not a moment for silence alone, this was a moment for story. The elder's words returned to him, as if carried on the smoke. Fire remembers, the old man had said. It remembers the lightning that birthed it, the storms that split the sky. It remembers the fear in the eyes of beasts, the awe in the hearts of men. And it remembers us, always. So the father began to speak, his voice low, steady, carrying the weight of more than hunger. He told them of the first fire, how long ago their people had feared it, fleeing from its blaze. How one brave ancestor had reached into the smoking branches after a storm and carried its spark back to the cave. How that spark had lit not only wood but the path of their kind. The children listened wide-eyed, the flames mirrored in their dark pupils. To them, these were not distant tales but living truths. They saw the first fire in their minds, saw the ancestors' trembling hands, felt the heat against their own faces. The story lived through them, carried in the fire's glow. The mother added her own words, her voice softer, weaving lessons within the tale. Fire is not ours, she said. It belongs to the world. We only borrow it, for a time. If we care for it, it cares for us. If we forget it, it leaves us in darkness. Her eyes fell on the children, each one listening, each one absorbing not just the tale but the warning. The father nodded, reaching into the flame with a stick, pulling it out glowing red. He held it up carefully. This is power, he said. It burns what it touches. It frightens the lion, it keeps the hyena away. But it can also burn us. We must never forget. He plunged the stick into the earth, the glowing tip hissing, sending up a curl of smoke. The children gasped softly, the image etched into their minds. Then came silence. The only voice was the fire itself, crackling, spitting, shifting in colors from orange to red to deep blue. The children leaned against their mother, their small bodies warm and safe, their breaths slowing. But their eyes did not leave the flames. Even as sleep tugged at them, the fire held them, teaching them in ways beyond words. The father, too, watched the flames, his thoughts heavy. He remembered the elder sitting as he now sat, the same glow reflected in tired eyes, the same lessons passed down. He felt the weight of time pressing close, the truth that one day, it would be his turn to be remembered in the firelight, his face flickering in the stories his children told. For now, though, his task was to endure, to keep the flame alive until they could carry it forward themselves. As the night deepened, the family huddled closer, the fire shrinking but still alive. Shadows danced on their faces, stretched across the earth, merging with the darkness beyond. Above, the stars wheeled slowly, countless fires in the sky mirroring the one at their feet. The mother whispered softly to the children, pointing to the stars. "They too are fire," she said. "But they are far away, too far to warm us. Yet they remind us, we are not alone in the dark." The children blinked up, their eyes filled with awe. Hunger had stolen much from them, but wonder still lingered, kept alive by firelight and story. The father closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the sounds of the night, the distant roar of lions, the call of owls, the sigh of the wind. Beyond the fire, the world was dangerous, vast, indifferent. But here, within the circle of flame, there was safety, meaning, memory. The lesson was clear: fire was not only a tool, not only protection. It was a bond, linking past to present, ancestor to child, body to spirit. By dawn, the flames had dwindled to embers, glowing faintly in the ash. The father stirred them gently, coaxing them with dry grass until a small flame leapt again. The children stirred, yawning, rubbing their eyes, their faces soft with sleep. They watched as he fed the fire, saw the care in his hands, and understood the unspoken message. The lesson of fire was never finished. It lived as long as they did, as long as they carried its spark across the savannah, across time itself. And though hunger and danger shadowed them, though loss pressed heavy, the fire remained. In its glow, they were not only survivors. They were keepers of memory, builders of meaning, children of flame. Even in his absence, the elder walked with them. His body had returned to the earth, but his voice remained in memory, carried like embers within each of them. Around the fire, in the hush of night, in the silence of the hunt, his words seemed to rise unbidden, woven into their thoughts. The elder was gone, yet he was never truly gone. His echoes lingered, shaping each step, each choice, as surely as the shadow of the fire flickered on their faces. The children felt his absence most sharply. They still turned their heads sometimes, expecting to see him sitting cross-legged by the fire, his long hands gesturing slowly as he spoke. They missed the way his voice rumbled low, carrying weight without needing force. They missed his laughter, rare but deep, like thunder rolling across the plains. They missed the safety he brought, the certainty that while he was there, the world was less frightening. And yet, even without him, his voice rose in their minds, guiding them in ways they scarcely understood. The father carried the elder differently. For him, the old man's absence was a wound but also a mantle. The elder had been not just kin but teacher, a man who had shaped his hands, his heart, his way of moving through the savannah. Every time he raised his spear, he remembered the old man's guidance: do not strike in anger. Strike in need. Strike with respect. Each time he coaxed the fire, he remembered: treat the flame as you treat your own blood. Even in silence, he felt the elder's gaze, steady and unyielding, asking him to be more than he thought he could be. The mother, too, remembered him. She recalled the way he had sat quietly with her when the children were sick, how he had taught her to mash certain roots into a healing paste, how he had spoken softly of endurance when she thought she could bear no more. His words returned to her now as whispers of strength: the earth is older than our suffering. Hold to it, and you will endure too. She clung to those echoes as if they were threads, weaving them into the fabric of each weary day. The savannah itself seemed to hold his memory. The children believed it. When the wind hissed through the grass, they whispered, "The elder is speaking." When the vultures circled high, they said, "He is watching." When the fire sparked and popped, they thought it was his laughter. The world was vast and cruel, but with the elder's presence stitched into its fabric, it felt less empty, less silent. On nights when the family sat quietly, their bellies filled just enough to soften the ache, the father sometimes spoke aloud as if to the elder. He did not expect answers, but the act itself gave him strength. "We hunted today," he would murmur into the fire. The spear struck true. The children ate. "We endured." His voice would catch, but he pressed on, speaking as if the old man still sat across from him, nodding with approval. These moments became ritual, not prayer, not memory alone, but a bridge across absence. The mother, too, spoke to him when no one else was listening. In the quiet of dawn, when she gathered sticks for the fire, she would murmur, "Watch over them. Keep their steps steady. Let their dreams be soft." She did not know if the elder could hear, but she felt lighter after the words left her lips, as if sharing the burden made it easier to bear. The children carried him into their games. They imitated his voice, deep and slow, turning pebbles into teaching tools, leaves into symbols. One child would sit cross-legged, speaking in a solemn tone, while the others nodded with exaggerated seriousness. It made them laugh, but beneath the play was longing. By pretending he was still with them, they kept his spirit alive, even in laughter. Sometimes the father feared they leaned too heavily on echoes. He worried that one day, the voice of the elder would fade, lost in the noise of hunger, fear, and survival. Yet each time he thought the memory might be dimming, something happened to revive it. A bird's cry would echo across the plains, and it would sound just like the elder's call to gather. A gesture of the children would remind him of the old man's patient teaching. A word would slip from his own mouth, and he would realize it was not his voice but the elder's shaping it. The echoes refused to die. One evening, as the fire burned low, the father told the children a story the elder had once told him. It was about a time long ago when the people had nearly vanished, when the rains had not come and the land had turned to dust. The elder had said, "We thought we would be the last. But we were not. We endured because we remembered. We remembered the fire, the hunt, the lessons of those before us. Memory kept us alive when strength alone could not." The children listened with wide eyes, their bodies curled close together. For them, the story was more than history. It was a reminder that even in the harshest times, survival was possible. The elder's words reached them still, shaping their hope, giving them courage to face another day. The echoes of the elder were not only comfort, they were responsibility. The father felt it in his bones. One day, he would become the voice that lingered after he was gone. One day, his children would sit by the fire, repeating his words to their own. The thought was both heavy and sacred. He understood now what the elder had meant when he said, "We do not live for ourselves alone. We live so that those who come after us may remember." The savannah roared and whispered around them, lions, hyenas, owls, wind, but the family carried another voice within, one that steadied them. In the darkest nights, when hunger gnawed, when fear pressed, when exhaustion nearly broke them, they closed their eyes and heard him. The elder, steady as stone, warm as fire. His body was gone, but his echoes shaped the path ahead, guiding them through shadow, into dawn. Fear had always been close, lurking in the tall grass, echoing in the roar of lions, whispering in the empty growl of the stomach. Yet alongside it, sometimes buried deep, sometimes glowing bright, there was faith. Not faith as in temples or carved idols, for the family had neither. Their faith was raw, unspoken, woven into survival itself. They lived between fear and faith, every moment balanced on that razor edge. The father knew fear well. It crept into his bones when he crouched in the grasses, spear raised against creatures stronger, faster, deadlier than himself. It gnawed at him when he thought of leaving the mother and children unprotected. It surged in his chest each time the wind carried the scent of lions. Yet he also knew that fear was not an enemy, it was a signal, a teacher. Without fear, he would have been reckless, careless, dead long ago. Fear sharpened his eyes, steadied his grip, made him listen to the rhythm of the earth. But fear alone could paralyze. To step forward despite it, that required something else. That required faith. The mother's fear was different. Hers was tied not to her own survival but to theirs, the children, the father, the fragile thread that bound them together. She feared the silence of hunger in her children's voices, feared the day when the father would not return from the hunt. At night, when she lay awake, staring at the dim glow of embers, her chest tightened with visions of loss. And yet, she also carried faith more deeply than any of them. It lived in the way she pressed the children close, in the way she whispered promises she could not guarantee: "We will eat again. We will see the rains. We will live." They believed her, and so she believed too. The children's fear was simpler, sharper. They feared the dark, the sudden growl of unseen beasts, the long stretches when hunger hollowed their bellies. They clutched one another when the lions roared, their eyes wide as moons. But children also carried faith naturally, almost without effort. They believed the fire would protect them. They believed their father would return from the hunt. They believed their mother's arms could shield them from everything. In their small voices, in their laughter that returned even after tears, faith was alive and bright. The savanna itself demanded this balance. By day, its vastness overwhelmed, endless grasslands, skies so wide they seemed to swallow the earth. By night, it became a chorus of threats. The family lived between these two faces of the world, caught in the tension between fear's warning and faith's endurance. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon and the shadows stretched long, the father sat by the fire, the spear across his knees. He spoke slowly, his words aimed not only at the children but at himself. "Fear keeps us awake," he said. "It tells us when danger comes. But fear does not feed us. Fear does not bring us fire. If we only listened to fear, we would never move. We would starve." He paused, the fire's glow flickering against his tired face. Faith tells us to take the step anyway. To trust the fire will burn. To trust the spear will strike. To trust the morning will come. The children listened, their heads tilted, the fire reflected in their eyes. The mother nodded faintly, her hand brushing through the youngest child's hair. These were not just words, they were survival itself, wrapped in the language of wisdom. The night deepened. Beyond the fire's glow, the eyes of predators sometimes gleamed, waiting, circling. Fear surged in their bodies, tightening every muscle. Yet the family did not flee. They sat close, feeding the fire, singing softly, whispering stories. Their faith was not the denial of fear but its counterweight. They believed, fiercely, stubbornly, that the fire would keep the beasts at bay, that dawn would break again. There were moments when fear threatened to smother faith entirely. Once, a lion's roar came so near that the children trembled in silence, their small hands gripping their mother's arms until her skin bruised. The father stood with his spear, his knees weak, certain this was the end. For a heartbeat, terror swallowed them whole. But then the lion moved on, its roar fading into the distance. They exhaled together, the fire snapping loudly as if in triumph. Fear had nearly broken them, but faith had kept them steady long enough to endure. Faith also lived in the unseen. In the stars above, the family saw not just cold fire but the presence of those who had gone before, the elder, and all the others whose names had faded. In their silence, the stars told them, "You are not alone. Others have walked this path. Others have endured." That thought, fragile as it was, steadied them. The mother sometimes pointed to the sky for the children. "Look there," she whispered. "That is the elder watching. That is his fire, far away. As long as it shines, we are not forgotten." The children nodded, their fear eased, their faith renewed. Living between fear and faith was not ease, it was constant strain, constant negotiation. Every step across the savanna, every hunt, every night's rest demanded it. Too much fear, and they would freeze, starve, die. Too much faith, and they would walk blindly into the jaws of predators. Balance was survival, and survival was balance. The father understood this most keenly after the last hunt. He had felt terror in his chest as the antelope cried, as the lions roared in the distance. He had nearly abandoned the kill, nearly fled. But faith that his family waited, faith that their lives depended on his courage, had kept his feet steady, his hands working. The gamble had been won not only by his skill but by the fragile balance between fear and faith. That night, when the family lay close, the fire burning low, the father whispered to himself words the elder had once spoken: "Fear walks beside you. Faith walks within you. Let both guide your steps." The words sank deep into him, into the silence. He understood then that this balance was not temporary, it was life itself, the endless rhythm of their kind. The embers glowed faintly, the stars turning slowly above. The children drifted into sleep, their breathing soft and steady. The mother leaned against the father, her eyes half closed, her hand resting over his. The savannah roared and whispered beyond, but within the circle of fire, between fear and faith, they endured.